Hello and welcome back to something. I don't know. A long time ago I was doing videos on each season of Star Trek, but it took me so long to watch season 3 of The Next Generation that I don't remember a large chunk of the episodes from it, so we're not doing that. Absolutely nothing wrong with season 3 of The Next Generation, by the way. It's just I've been interested in so many other narrative things that I've taken it really slowly. And I've enjoyed taking it really slowly. Like, once every month or two, I'm like, you know what? I'm down to watch an episode of Star Trek. And then every now and again, it's got Troy's mother in, and then maybe I stay away for like 2 or 3 months instead. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm just going to talk about a very specific set of episodes that I've just watched because I have so much to say about them. I want to talk about the season 3 finale, the season 4 part 2 of that episode, and then most importantly, the episode after that, Family. So spoilers ahead. And speaking of spoilers, I was actually spoiled about not necessarily what was going to happen in this episode, but the fact that Picard gets Borgified and that it affects him emotionally. But yeah, this is something I've been waiting for a long time. It is the Borg becoming a threat, the Borg becoming relevant, and the Federation, or I guess the Enterprise, having to deal with them without, they're so far technologically advanced compared to the Enterprise, and how do you deal with that? And the two-parter was quite fun. It explored Riker having to be made the captain and how he feels about that, and how he deals with this up-and-coming first officer who he doesn't get along with but is very capable and competent, and what that working relationship is like when those two don't like each other, and Riker having to make decisions which are best for the crew and the ship and humanity. I loved that moment when he's telling Wesley to key in, basically hyper driving through the Borg ship as a last resort to destroy it, even though it will mean their deaths. And just the horror on Wesley's face and Riker being like, do it, kind of thing. It was also a really good play on the dynamic between Riker and Picard. That's been building up all this time throughout the show, because Locutus, having access to all of Picard's memories and stuff, kind of knows what to expect from Riker, and what would be expected from him as a Federation captain and all this stuff. I've always felt, by the way, since I watched the original series first, that Riker's kind of meant to be TNG's version of Kirk. It almost feels like the premise of TNG is, what if we saw Kirk's story before he became captain? What if we saw him learning in a first officer role to be a captain? And I'm sure we have more stuff like that actually for Kirk now, with Strange New Worlds and all of that. I know very little about what's currently going on with modern Star Trek. I'll get there. I heard Kirk had a cameo on Strange New Worlds or something lately. I don't know. But that's kind of how I've always viewed Riker as a character. And so for a minute I was thinking, I actually don't know all that much about TNG as a whole. Do we actually lose Picard and then we just have Captain Riker from now on? I know Picard doesn't die because he's got a series later on, but does he step into more of an admiral position or something? And I guess I was kind of relieved to see that's not the case, because I do really like Captain Picard as well. But yeah, that's kind of in brief how I felt about the two-parter. But the main thing I want to talk about is season 4 episode 2, Family, because that episode made me tear up 3 separate times. All 3 plot lines in that episode got me. I think it's become my favourite episode of Star Trek TNG so far. So the main plotline obviously focuses on Picard kind of taking shore leave, returning home and visiting his brother's family for the first time in I think it's meant to be 20 years. And we see that there's kind of this deep schism, this deep resentment that his brother has for him. They have very different worldviews. His brother favours traditionalism and heritage and all that stuff, while Picard values progression and technological advancement and using food replicators and stuff like that. What's interesting, by the way, is that while his brother is a bit of a bastard, I actually found myself agreeing with some of his points in regards to cooking becoming a lost art and relying too heavily on replicators and stuff like that, it did actually kind of make me think about the way we're automating a lot of artistic processes nowadays and how I feel about that. I'm sure if I watched this episode 5 years ago, I would have felt very differently about his brother. So it's interesting how opinions can kind of age with the times in that way. But his brother is mostly just a grumpy old bastard. But, Picard gets approached by his friend about a potential different job, and he actually finds himself considering it, which frightens him. And obviously he's dealing with like this trauma of he's just had his body and his mind taken over, and he feels some amount of responsibility for the actions Locutus took within his body. And I love that scene where he and his brother get into a physical fight, and obviously it's kind of expected that they get into this fight and they go down and they get all muddy and messy, and then they end up laughing and suddenly they actually love each other and all that. That's a little cliche, that was a little expected. But then when Picard's laughter broke down and he started crying about how he hadn't been strong enough and stuff, oh my god, it got me right in the heart. When he finally lets out all of that pain and does it in front of, like, the one person, I suppose, who is kind of there for him in that very warped, very violent, fraternal way. I don't have a brother, so I don't know. But it's interesting because the entire time he's staying with his brother keeps making jibes about, oh yes, well, you are the hero. Oh yes, well, they want you for a parade and you're on, oh yes, blah 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 blah. And it's interesting to just see how that grates on Picard's consciousness because he thinks he's not good enough and so on. And I appreciate this episode so much because TV back then, it's airing weekly. There's no on demand, there's no iPlayer yet. It might come out in a DVD box set, but not for like a year or two. These episodes are kind of supposed to be Monster of the Week. It's kind of supposed to be tune in to see this week's adventure, and then next week we might like make passing reference to it. It might become part of the show's lore, but it's not going to be expounded upon in the next episode in any real way. But this episode actually took the time to do that, and it was absolutely beautiful. This episode also took the time to explore Worf's parentage and what his relationship with his human parents is like, and how his parents, he feels, don't truly understand him as a Klingon and his Klingon values, and how it's embarrassing because they're not really supposed to visit him while he's on duty and so on and so forth. And that subplot was beautiful too, because you saw how he enjoyed spending time with them in every scene despite the awkwardness. Like, you could see, like, props to Michael Dorn, because like he made it in the facial expressions, the kind of, he made it obvious that even though he's embarrassed by his parents and he kind of doesn't want them to be there, he's also just deep down so happy to see them. I think between Worf and Picard, this episode does a really good job of showing that weird part of a family dynamic where there can be hostility or awkwardness or, negative feelings, but at the same time that love is still there. And that scene in 10 Forward with Guinan, when his parents are kind of there without him and they're kind of despairing about what to do because they're not sure they truly understand him, and there's this rift between them. And then Guinan comes and talks about how when Worf is stood there looking for his home star, he's not looking towards any Klingon worlds, he's looking towards Earth, and he's like clearly thinking of them. That was goddamn beautiful, man. And like his love of prune juice, while it wasn't established on Earth with his parents, it's something he went out of his way to explore because it reminded him of being in this kind of alien home world. And oh man. And then the third and final subplot was a lot shorter. We didn't see too much story time dedicated to it, but just Beverly Crusher finding that recording from her late husband for Wesley when he grew up to kind of like talk to him as an adult man to man. Just that scene on the holodeck with Wesley watching that message back, man. That's an easy tearjerker from me because I lost a parent at 10 years old, but like, oh my god, this episode just kept punching me right in the gut. I love it so much. And that's really all I came here to say today. Just, yes, I'm still watching through Star Trek The Next Generation very slowly, and while I may not be watching it within a time frame that allows for me to assess an entire season, I think what I'm going to start doing is when I find an episode I really like and just want to talk about, I'll just make an episode about a specific episode. Why not? Let's do this instead. Because I can't just not share what this episode did to me. It's absolutely my favourite episode of TNG so far. It's so humanizing. Like, not that the characters weren't humanized before, but it's so nice to just take a minute away from the adventures and check in with everyone. It's not the first time this has happened in the show, but I think it is the most effective time so far. And when you feel this close to the characters, when you've seen their quieter and more intimate personal moments like that, you know, it makes you feel more for them when you're doing those big adventures where they're fighting the Borg and everything. It makes you care about them more in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, that's how Star Trek made me tear up 3 times in a single episode. I hope you enjoyed hearing me gush about it, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.